Well, hello everyone. My name is Sean McVeigh. I'm the National Training Coordinator for the Soil Science Division, and we have a pretty full room here at the National Soil Survey Center in Lincoln, Nebraska. I want to welcome you to today's seminar, Changing Climate Communication, Changing Change. And as training coordinator, communication is one of those things of interest to me, but how do we exchange information, ideas, tools, and best practices? Sometimes we use blogs, we use newsletters, we can use a group listserv, maybe use a third-party service like Constant Contact to track our email sign-ups and email communications. We use webinars, we use conferences, sometimes we use social media, but how do we find out what is important to you, and how should we get the word out? What is our communication strategy? So I think that's a very good topic to be talking about today. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Michelle Schoenberger.
Good morning, everyone, and I guess good afternoon for some of those online. Welcome to the Third Fan Seminar. I want to tell you straight up, this is a discussion seminar. It is not a formal webinar. So it's really something to be coming here to listen, to think, and maybe to ask questions. This is more of a proactive approach to our very hectic USDA world that we live in right now, where everything is the latest problem du jour. Today we are very, very fortunate to have two speakers. We've got Dr. Randy Johnson from the Forest Service R&D in Washington office. He's involved with the regional climate hubs. And going all the way down from that national, regional scale down to where the rubber meets the road, we have Dr. DePon Pathak, who's dealing with communication to people. So we think by listening to both of those, we can start looking what we're doing within each of our different groups here to figure out how we might contribute. Just to let the people online know that who we have in this room, we've got the NRCS National Soil Survey Center and probably some of the other staffs here. I see that we have the High Plains Regional Climate Center. Did I get the acronym correct? Good. So, I'm working on that one. We've got the U.S. Forest Service at the National Ag Forestry Center, and, of course, ARS. If you didn't get it already, FAN stands for that, Forest Service, ARS, and Natural Resource Conservation Service. I have to tell you, before we have Randy Johnson speak, I need to let you know that the Secretary has not rolled out the regional climate hubs. So we are limited with what Randy's going to be able to say and what questions he's going to be able to answer. Keep that in mind. And like I said, this session is to start priming the pump so we can start being proactive to maybe make some connections with the people in this very room and do a really good job of what I refer to as research. Sean talked about communication, and communication is going to be key. My last thing there is changing change. For us here, for the FAN, for USDA, it's how do we change what we do to affect change on the ground to deal with changing climates. So let's begin with the first speaker. If you could bring up Randy's talk there. I've had the great pleasure of knowing Randy Johnson way back. Well, not way back, Randy. It wasn't that long, but we went to school together.
Yes, it was.
Yes, it was. At North Carolina State University, the second best forestry school that there is. And we can argue about the first one, and yes, I graduated from that one also. Dr. Randy Johnson is, let me get the title correct here. He's actually worked all over, has actually worked with industry in Brazil, worked in New Zealand, has worked with several agencies, but right now, he is the national program leader in the Forest Service R&D in genetics and climate change research, providing support in areas of genetics, biotech, adaptation to global change, and carbon cycle research. So I give you Randy Johnson, and Randy, it sounds like we've got you all set up with live meetings, so please go ahead. For those of you on live meeting, if you cannot hear, just chime in and we'll try to correct that so we can all benefit from the talk today. Randy?
Okay. And I think as of this week, my other title is National Leader for the USDA Climate Change Hub. And we're still trying to figure out what we're going to call these things because the name the department came up with is way too big for me to remember. The USDA Regional Hubs for Risk Adaptation and Mitigation to Climate Change. And unless I have it in front of me, I can't even remember what it is. Okay? And basically, you can ask me anything you want. The only thing I'm not going to tell you is where the locations are and who's leading them. But since most of you are Forest Service, ARS, and NRCS, you should know this or have access to this since our three agencies are putting them forward. So what I'm going to quickly do is just do a hub overview, talk about the regions, and where we are in the status of things.
How do we get the picture?
Are you not getting... Am I? All right. Is it not coming through?
Yes.
Okay. I just put it. Okay. The audio, but no video yet. All right. I'm on one of the hubs, and I'm seeing that. Are you getting it on your end?
But we can hear you, but we just have to hook up to the live meeting to see the visual aspect.
All right. So you're not hooked up to live meeting there?
Hey, now what? Hold on.
Not yet.
All right. So should I be telling stories about Michelle from graduate school until we get the things up?
Only if it's about volleyball.
Well, there was the time you, Claire, and what's her name, killed me when you invited me to aerobics, but we won't go into that. Male pride almost killed me that day.
Are the people online able to get into the presentation?
Yes, we can do it. Yeah.
Okay. Randy, why don't you go ahead and talk, since your slides really are more just the text.
Okay. Well, if you just pull up the PowerPoint, I'm on 3. And then all it says is what are the hubs. And the next slide, this pretty much came right out of what came out of the department, a vision statement. It says agricultural production and natural resources maintained and strengthened under increasing climate variability and environmental change. And the mission and what we're really about is to develop and deliver science-based, region-specific information and technology to ag and natural resource managers that enables climate-smart decision-making. So somebody had the right words in there when they put this together. So what are we really about? I mean, if you look at what USDA does, we do a lot of science, we do some translation, and we actually have a great boots-on-the-ground network to get information to farmers, ranchers, and foresters. So if you look at what we say we're going to be providing, the research doesn't come out too strong, but that's part of it. But a lot of technical support and outreach and education. I mean, that comes through a variety of things. I mean, if you think about it, we have the USDA service centers, we have Forest Service direct centers, we have access to state ag extension. I mean, USDA funds about 20% of that, so we're hoping we can use that. So we actually have boots on the ground to take the information we're learning from the science and get it to the end user, the forester, the farmer, the rancher. That's one thing we have in USDA that nobody else has in the federal government. So when you think about the climate science centers and you think about the NOAA research, that's one thing we bring to the table that they can't bring to. And they also want us to be dealing with assessments and forecasts. And that means many things to different people. But essentially, up front, what we want to do is look at our regions, try to assess what the greatest risks are in light of climate change, and that we address those first. I'll be honest with you, I have a hard time with the name climate change in our title. When I talk to foresters and my cousin farmers and I say climate change, their eyes glaze over and they could care less. But if I talk about drought, if I talk about a change in growing season, if I talk about a change in pests, they're interested. So in our efforts, I I'm concerned about using the climate change word. And honestly, I asked the department to get it out of their title, and they looked at me like I was crazy. So, just for information. So this is kind of a conceptual framework for the hub, and it's slide 7 for those in the room. What we're saying we do most of is science coordination, synthesis, and developing tools. But we're going to get that science from a variety of partners. I mean, we have USDA internal research, ARS, Forest Service, ARS, NRCS, and we have a strong research program. But we also fund the external programs through NIFA, through the CAPs and whatnot. And then we've got non-federal providers, we've got other federal partners, the NOAA Research, USGS Climate Science Centers, NASA, DOE, they all have strong climate change programs. But our goal is to take all that information and then translate it and get it out to the landowner via the Ag Extension, USDA Service Centers, our Threat Centers, E-Extension, a variety of ways we can do it in USDA. And when we talk about what we do that others aren't doing, it's that bottom line there. But we have the ability through those to get directly to our stakeholders on the ground. And the theory about this system is that as we bring the information pools down, we're going to be working with our stakeholders to figure out if we're really doing the right thing. I mean, scientists are notorious for producing a lot of stuff, but probably most of the stuff the guys on the ground could care less about. I mean, it drives me crazy when I talk to a scientist and ask them a question and their response is read my paper. Most farmers I know aren't interested in going into a technical journal and reading a technical paper. So we need to know if what we're producing through this effort is actually meeting the need and what we need to look at that we're not looking at, what we need to do different. So, and that's, going to take time to get that all figured out. And what we're calling the hubs is everything USDA has in this pot. Well, and if you look at this diagram, it kind of hits the Ag Extension and the Extension because we fund 20% of that. So one of our biggest chores is going to figure out how to bring the state's land-grant universities, the Ag Extension, into this and be full partners with what we're doing. Because in reality, they do a lot of translations. And my thoughts are when I ask them what do they need from us to be involved, they say money. I'll get to that issue in a little bit. Where are the hubs? If you look at when we put out a request for proposals, we had them in hubs. I mean, they looked nice and made sense until we started thinking about the logistics. And as the writing team said, this isn't going to work. The NRCS runs on states. Ag Extension runs on states. And it became obvious that, in this map, Colorado is part of 3 regions. And that was confusing to them. And if we're going to work with people, we decided we needed to keep it a straight line. So we redid them. The Southern Plains looks a lot smaller, the Southwest got bigger, but this is the best we could do given the things we have. So this is what the regions are going to boil down to when they're announced next month. Other federal regional efforts. We're not the first regional climate change thing. I mean, there's plenty out there. The 3 out there now that are known best are the NOAA Research, Fish and Wildlife Landscape Conservation Cooperatives, and the USGS Climate Science Centers. I always like to explain how we did things different than Interior. I was just at the USGS Climate Science Center staffing meeting earlier this week and learned some details, which were really neat. But the way GS and Interior did it is they went to Congress, got approval. They got money from Congress. Right now they're complaining about a flatline budget of $24 million a year for their system. And then they put out a request for proposals. We are doing it a bit different from USDA. We haven't told Congress yet. We have no money, but we did put out a request for proposals. So, in June, the hubs were announced by the Secretary, and they put out an internal competitive process among USDA facilities to serve as the hub. And so what happened, and I'm sitting around pretty much the three agencies that came together around the table, is ARS, Natural Resource Conservation Service, and Forest Service down around the table, and it's like, who's going to bid for a hub? And they look at each other, and it's like, you all realize it's an unfunded mandate right now. And with the exception of a few Forest Service stations, no one really wanted to bid on it. If you looked at what they wanted at least 3 new FTEs, they wanted a variety of things, and it was going to take considerable effort. But as we sat around the table, we realized that if the department didn't get proposals, then they would just say what they expect and dictate it down. So we felt, as the three agencies, that we needed to put together a proposal for each region that clearly stated what we could produce within the context of the hubs, given our current resources. We felt it important that, since we were going to have to do this with our own dollars, we defined what we could and could not do. So, as I tell people, it's fun being sneaky until you get caught. So the three agencies put together multi-agency teams in each of the regions and had them come up with a proposal. The department found out that they were getting one proposal per region and were kind of shocked because they had told everybody they were going to get all these proposals. If they had done it like DOI, where they actually were offering $2 million a year per hub, they probably would have, but that wasn't how we did it. ARS clearly pointed out that they were lucky they were getting one proposal, and they better be happy. And of course, I will deny I ever said that, but that's how it happened. And so when they were reviewed in the fall of 2013, instead of a multiple choice question, the panel had a true-false question to answer. Do you want this hub or not? What they did do is they looked at what we put in, and they said, here's some things we need you to change. And when we changed whatever we thought we could do. So that's where we are in this process right now. The proposals were good proposals. If you look at the letters of support we got, 90 universities, 90 universities, 14 state governments, 5 tribes, 3 private companies, 34 NGOs, and a host of others. And then we had over 200 letters of support, which is pretty amazing when you consider this is an unfunded mandate. So, and that's kind of where we stand now. Next, sometime in February, the dates have changed 3 times in the last 2 weeks. So all I know is sometimes in February, the Secretary will announce the selection of the hubs. And then those hubs are going to spend the next year putting together their stakeholders, establishing work plans, looking through their list of projects to determine, what can we do up front to get what we need to the ground. And the reason I'm on this call is not just to tell you what's going on, it's to listen to the next talk to figure out what it is we need to send to the ground. In the work plan elements, the committee gave them a whole list of things to do, who's going to do what. We want vulnerability assessments, and the response has been, we just did one for the NCA. What are you looking for exactly? And the department says, well, we want you to do a vulnerability assessment to see which factors do we really need to look at first, who's at most risk, and let's see if we can't prioritize those guys first. Outreach and education, and probably the most important thing is bringing the stakeholders together, because that's who we're trying to serve, and we've got to make sure we're meeting their needs in a way that works. And that's where I have a hard time with the word climate change, because their needs probably have nothing to do with that word in their mind. So now it's just quick and broad, and I'm here to answer questions when the time's right.
Thank you, Randy. Sean, just a technical question. If there's questions online, will you be able to?
If there's questions online, you can go ahead and answer those. People can ask them now. Otherwise, you can use the Q&A tab at the top of your live meeting frame and type in a question, and we can answer those at the end.
Okay. I'm just going to be going first in the sense I want to acknowledge several of the entities already in this room that I'm very well aware of. We tapped into their information for tools with regards to climate change for the region. No, no problem. Exactly. Okay. So, you know, I've always been a big proponent of research, and that's RE-search, because I think a lot of the information is already out there, and we need to use it because decisions are being made today, particularly with regards to climate. It's not like we can do research and 10, 20 years down the line, we can use that to solve a problem that will be well in place by then. So the question I would have for you, Randy, since you have the different agencies around the table, how is that sort of taken into account that there exists so many entities already delivering this? How did they see us maybe bringing that group together, or bringing the information together, or I guess how does that
what goes on that circle that says translation? Because we all have a fire hose of information. The problem, you're right, is not we don't have enough information. I mean, we don't have all the answers, but we have more information than most individuals can deal with. And that's kind of the big issue we've got to come to grips with. I mean, the theory was we'd have staff that go through this stuff, be working with Extension and others and find out what were the questions, and then they would put together something in a form that was usable that would help the farmer, rancher, forester. Because there are no additional FTEs in any of the regions, and we're just adding more chores to people, the question is, can we be effective doing that? And which partners can we bring in to help us do that? I mean, that's where, you know, for agroforestry, you all would be the place to go. For other issues, the Land Grant University. You know, for a lot of the forestry things, we've got a threat assessment center that should be able to help with that. So I agree with you. I have some ideas on what the answers are, and basically it will be a function of what partners each of the regions can bring to the table and what resources they can gather at this point in time.
Okay.
Is that vague enough?
No, because I know you have some definite opinions really on what some of these things might look like down the line, but that will actually take away from your next speaker's topic. So I want that for the other ingredient for the soup that we can all mix up and talk about then. Are there any other general questions with regards to the regional hubs? In the back, if you could just identify yourself loudly.
Hi, my name is Natalie. Regional Climate Center. And I'm just curious, this climate change hub, where are your climate experts come from? Is that internal from the USDA, or are they supposed to be from the partner organizations?
And if you could just kind of rephrase that question, it was kind of far from the...
Right, and just out of curiosity, Randy, were you able to hear that?
Where are our climate experts coming from?
Yeah.
Is essentially the question. I mean, if you look at what we're staffing up the hubs with, they're all USDA people. And each USDA hub has people from ARS, Forest Service, and NRCS. And the people that actually do the work is just a function of who we're freeing up right now from and duties as assigned. And all of them are in the climate field. I mean, I could list the names and tell you who the leads are and who some of the people are, and you'd recognize them. We realize to do this well, we've got to bring in others. Talking with the forest climate change community of practice, I mean, there's a place to go look for stuff. I am not familiar with the ag community of practices. That's where I have to count on the ARS and NRC as components. And we're going to draw science from everywhere. So right now, we know what we have to do. We have people in line to do it, but how it really happens is something we've got to work out over the next year. That's part of the work plan thing. Who's going to do what? Who can we free up? Who can we bribe to do it from outside the agencies? That sort of thing.
And I think this might lead, this is Michelle Schoenberger again, this might lead really to those regions knowing those connects. So for instance, I rely on several of the resources that luckily are based here at the University of Nebraska campus for me to pull in my drought maps and other information that I use to support my forestry recommendations. We actually have a question online. This is Justin Durner from ARS, and what are the anticipated funding avenues for the climate hubs in FY15? Randy, you can go ahead and just answer any way you want on that, since we know there's no resources, but what is anticipated funding avenues beyond getting comments?
We are doing our best to put the hubs in our FY15 request for appropriations. We haven't been very successful about getting more money the last few years, but we're trying that route. And that's what we're doing here. We have to sit down and talk to NIFA, the other major player in here, and see how, since they're the ones who give away money in USDA, we've got to figure out how to get them totally involved. They are a player. They say they will support the hubs. They haven't said how they're going to support the hubs. So that's a conversation still to be had, Justin. So, you know, from an ARS point of view, hopefully you all put in money for hub activities. I know the Forest Service put in a chunk of change saying, you know, to do the hubs, as we've been requested to do, we need X amount of dollars. And we won't know the answer to that for quite a while.
Any other questions in this room? Then I just have one more question, since we do work a little bit with the Climate Change Science Centers, which is the USGS group. I know in talking with Jerry McMahon in the southern region that he's trying to talk with all the directors from all the different regions to start saying what's worked within their region, so people can start maybe tapping into a tool that they recognize as needed, as opposed to just every center just going off on its own and maybe not leveraging their resources to the best deal. And the other one is identifying, again, that tool format. That's good. Do you foresee when the hubs, when the announcement is rolled out, that there is some type of, I guess, common communication early on for directions? Or will everybody just scramble to get the hubs working?
Well, the hub leads have been informed that one of their priorities is to bring together the stakeholder groups. And we're going to do that at a regional level, region by region. Part of the way we're going to speak with stakeholders and take advantage of the existing networks. For example, if the LCCs and CSCs already bring the natural resource people together once or twice a year, we don't need to ask them to show up again. We just need to be there. And I've informed Robin O'Malley over on the GF side that we intend to, you know, take full advantage of their stakeholder groups. The groups we're going to have to bring together, which aren't in the other ones, are those with agriculture, the farmers and the ranchers. And that, you know, hopefully the regions can learn from one another. This is going to be a learning experience for all of us. So that's the group we're going to have to get together in the first 6 months so that we can determine what's needed and how to frame it, because we don't want to waste our time for something nobody wants. And like I said, that's going to be kind of learn as we go, and hopefully the regions can learn together.
Well, yes, please. Could you repeat that? Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm just going to repeat it in case the people online didn't get to really hear it. Ken Hubbard here, and again, that's a resource that I've tapped into for some of my stuff, and that's what I realized is that there's these tremendous, not only data sources, but really how the information's been distilled down and translated into usable maps and graphics and translations, and that's what we need to be aware of. When we begin this work so that we don't try to recreate anything. And the 6 regional climate centers are brought together under the ACES. Yeah, I wrote it down the wrong way. At this point, given the time, Randy, this is a perfect segue into our next speaker because it really speaks to that whole question of stakeholders, and I think what we've already identified, I think there's a whole scale of stakeholders and end users in this. You've got the people that are already doing the work that we need to bring to bear to the translation. We've got the natural resource professionals, and we've got the public out there. So it now gives me tremendous pleasure to introduce Dr. Tapan Pathak here. He's from the School of Natural Resources here at the University of Nebraska. Tapan is the extension educator on climate variability, and he deals with climate communication. I have been very, very interested in the communication of science for many, many years. It may be the Catholic in me, but early on, since I got brought into the climate change in the 1980s, I realized I was sequestering carbon with my publications. And really what we want to try to do is utilize USDA information to affect change on the ground to sequester carbon in the ground. And so it really comes down to how do we communicate what we do. Randy's already brought up, do we call these climate change hubs? Do we even say climate hubs? You know, just really how do we communicate the science that we're doing, because it is relevant, and we don't want just a word or a phrase to be that barrier. So I give you Dr. Tapan. And could you just give a little bit more about your background?
All right.
Because you're an excellent resource, again, for all of us here.
All right. Thanks so much for a nice introduction, and thanks for this opportunity. So my name is Tapan Pathak. I'm an extension educator. I have been in this position for more than 3 years. So I have been communicating climate change to many different clienteles, all the way from producers to different civic organizations or general citizens of Nebraska and other states. And it's pretty interesting that since I've been communicating climate change, I've hardly given talk on how to communicate climate change. So that'll be a good opportunity. So my background is mainly my PhD is in agricultural engineering, but then in my PhD time, I used climate information, climate forecast, how we put it in a agricultural decision perspective. So I was in Florida, and so some of the climate variability signals are pretty strong there. So how do we use those information and put in a agricultural decision? So that's my background, and also my master's was from Utah. So and there I had more in terms of irrigation and remote sensing. But mainly in the climate and agriculture, that's my training background. And so today's talk is mainly about how we communicate climate change, and what we, particularly what I learned from last 3 years communicating climate change with different groups, and what really worked, what didn't work, and I'll also mention some of the projects that I'm involved in, especially in educating or doing the professional development. So that would be most of my talk about. All right, let's start with need for information. When we wanted to start this project on climate change professional development, we sort of gathered, is there a need from different clientele about climate change? And so, just some of the comments from different clientele groups. First one is one of the farmers mentioned that, are we going to be in the cycle of drought and wet periods more than ever that we had in the past? How can we control that? How can we manage our farms so that we get more benefit out of it? The other one from extension educator wanted to re-emphasize that even though we have some of the programs going on in climate change professional development, but it is important to reiterate those programs and do it more often with the same clientele group, because if you do your programming just once, it might not help them fully understand this issue. And so reiterative programs in that area it is, and that's the comment was about. Third comment, I attended a climate training in Nebraska, and I brought in different sorts of clientele, not the same ones that attended the previous one, because wanted to get more and more extension folks involved in this issue of climate change. The other one last one was from one of the ranchers. We realized that climate is changing, I think. Any information I can acquire or be aware of, I'm more than receptive. So there is definitely some, and then again, some of these farmers are, they are sort of an outliers who are in this climate change front, and there are some who are kind of challenging this issue. But if you really talk about it, some of the changes they have been seeing in the field, it's just a matter of how do we translate and how do we put in a climate change perspective. So that's another issue. But given that we have this need out there, and this is mainly in the north-central region, Nebraska, Kansas, Michigan, and so it's kind of a blend of all these comments that we got from. So our approach, just to give you some background, based on some of these comments, we thought let's start this climate change professional development for North Central region. So we proposed a project that doing a climate change professional development education targeting extension educators in this North Central region. So we are covering 12 states in the region, and our main idea was to give facts, science-based information, first thing. Second thing is, since it's for climate change and sustainable act, we wanted to have it more locally relevant. So if we are doing any program here, we wanted to be those issues or impacts or adaptation mitigation need to be relevant to North Central region agriculture. So that was another goal that we had. And we wanted to have it more interactive rather than one-way flow of information. So we got funding from USDA Sustainable Ag Research and Education for North Central Region Professional Development Program. So we started it 2 years ago, and we finished some part, and we'll talk about what we learned from some of the outcomes of it. Now, our main clientele group was extension in this program, and so the question is, why did we target extension and not the farmers directly? Since climate change and some of the practices, our end users are really farmers in the field. But we thought, rather than going direct route and talking climate change with farmers, it's much more efficient to talk to extension folks who are connected with those farmer groups, because mainly the idea is trust. Because if you are communicating climate change, the first thing comes in is trust. If the person is trusted source, then it's much more efficient to absorb those information. So we got this key educators from different states in the region, and we targeted expansion folks. And as you can see, one comment that I got from is, if Bob thinks that is an important issue, so do I. So that was a comment from one of the farmers, because they trust their extension educators who are working in the field with them. The slide, I took it from one of the AFRI-funded project, Useful to Usable. And this is another ongoing project led by Linda Prokop in Purdue University. And UNL and other institutes are heavily involved in this project. It's a corn and climate project. So they are developing how we can use climate information and put in tools that farmers use. And then this was specifically targeted for corn producers. And so what, I mean, first 2 years they did a lot of survey and asking about what sort of tools they need and who do they trust in terms of climate change information. And so this was one of the questions that they asked to crop advisors is, how much do you trust or distrust the following agencies or organizations in terms of information about climate change and the potential impacts? And as you can see, University Extension was one of the trusted sources. Almost 81% responded that they trust UNL Extension, University Extension. But yeah, I mean, and then this is based on their survey, but there are many other surveys who do respond similar answers. Scientists are also one of the trusted sources, 69.6%. Then the farmers group and family and friends who give advice to them to make decisions. So they do trust those agencies or individuals. What they don't trust is mainly the media sources. And in a way, it's a good thing sometimes. So that's one of the other justification why we wanted to target extension for doing this sort of programming. Okay, just a brief what our project activities were in this program. First thing, we wanted to develop resources on climate change and agriculture, sustainable agriculture, and we did not want to do one more climate change resources because there are so many good and credible sources of information available already. So rather than creating one more resource, we compiled from different agency reports, such as we used USDA reports, we used EPA climate change indicator reports that came out, and some of the university reports or fact sheets on climate change. So we put them in different sections, such as, you know, the basics on climate change, adaptations, mitigations, communication of climate change was one part of it. And so we created, we initially wanted to keep it very short and brief, but then it turned out pretty long resource handbook, and this is one of the things I'll talk about which failed. Then we also developed core curriculum. So we thought that some of this extension educators are doing a lot of programming with their farmers group and on different topics, and a lot of times they do require this kind of information. So rather than having them create their
For a minute, thinking that week in heaven, whatever, for his birthday, they talked to him, man, he's going to have to work that Saturday, but for Joe to call me like she said you would.
All right. So I would be doing a birthday. So yeah, so we created this core curriculum on climate change, and so our main idea was that whenever they have this programming, rather than creating something new, they can use those information readily available and do their programming and use, you know, that's how maybe they can induce some of this climate change information.
All participants are now in listen-only mode.
All right. So the third thing then we did was doing the actual workshops on climate change and sustainable ag. So we selected 5 or 6 key educators from all the states and invited them for the workshop. And project evaluation, that's where we kind of knew what was good and what was bad about, what worked and what didn't work on that. So in the workshop, there was a 1.5-day long workshop, and we heavily put time on climate change communication. So we had 2 different sessions only on climate change communication, and we had a lot of brainstorming sessions on, we have them, this is a group of educators who kind of put on the round table and discussed about, when they want to communicate climate change, what are the opportunities they can, or maybe what are the strategies they can use, or how do they start communicating. But then, what are the challenges? Why they are not communicating climate change? What do they think is the biggest barrier? So we had those discussions, and top 2 images are from Nebraska workshop, and bottom one is from Michigan. So we did 2 workshops, and on this program, I was the PI on Nebraska side, and Dr. Julie Dahl from Michigan was also involved with me on this project. So, opportunities and challenges that came out of this breakout sessions. So that educators responded to the opportunities. Having resources on climate change, that's a good opportunity, because since we already have those resources, it might be easier for them to use them and communicate with the client. Present strategies in a way that it discusses multiple benefits, not just talk about the adverse impact of climate change, but maybe also talk about what are the good some of the benefits associated with this changing conditions. Reach out to younger farmers. That's interesting, because a lot of educators mentioned that some of these younger farmers are much more receptive to new information on climate change as opposed to the seasoned farmers. And so that's another opportunity was mentioned. Talk about the incentives of conservation practices such as soil health and cover crops and all those things. New market for change of crops, getting involved, getting farmers, farm organization leadership involved in this overall climate change talks and issues. Show them there are likely real winners, such as longer growing season. Then you can go for a longer season variety, which turned out to be more yield, bottom line, more profit. So talk about those things. Drought as motivation, that was mentioned, because this workshop was done in 2013, and 2012 was the severe drought that we had. So if there are extreme conditions, then use them as an opportunity to discuss about those kind of issues. So these were the opportunities. On the challenges side, of course, skepticism from, well, they mentioned farmers. Farmers are skeptical about it, but they also mentioned universities, which was pretty interesting. Other stakeholders. Then the other challenge, extreme views on both sides. And that's true, because sometimes even climate change believers are on this extreme side, and sometimes impacts adversely rather than helping this issue. So that's another challenge. Now, the other challenge is translating this communication or this funding and the education and research into behavioral changes for farmers, because this is kind of a long-term process. How do we see if there is any success stories on that? So that's another challenge that they mentioned about. And long-term investment on this issue and economic returns. And the other thing that was mentioned in the challenge is faculty are not engaged in practical solutions at the field scale. So more practical solutions needed rather than just the research side. So that was another challenge mentioned. So I thought this was a pretty good brainstorming session, and then what came out of it is some of the states mentioned that they will start engaging this climate change talk in some of their extension programming. Even in Nebraska, we had those key educators who started inducing this climate change in their programming. So we did see some of the success in doing this kind of interactive sessions. Now on the evaluation side, I mean, just wanted to see what really worked and overall and what did not. And so overall, this workshop was, overall 91% of educators, and there were about 50 to 60 educators total that increased their understanding on this overall climate change issue. 96% agreed that their motivation has increased to engage in this kind of talking. 91% reported their ability to address climate change questions. So we also put in frequently asked questions and answers in the resources. So that was a good thing that they liked that. 87% agreed that the co-learning, because we also had a farmers panel, and we also engaged farmers on, how do they see the climate change in their field, and so there was a lot of interaction, and so they thought that co-learning was a good idea. Now, what did not work was only 18% mentioned that they used some of the climate change slides that we presented, and so we wanted, probably the reason is that some of them mentioned that it's too early for them to just start doing programming. It might take years to, gradually induce this climate change in their programming. 50 to 70% are likely to use the materials, and 40% are not likely to use the way it is produced, because as I mentioned, we had this resource handbook was that big, and they are not going to read those reports. And so some of the comments that we received is, rather than creating these resources, we would like it in 1 or 2 pages that we can really use it. So we're kind of working on it now and see if we can improve it and so we are running it for next year, so hopefully we'll see if there is an improvement on that. All right, so this was mainly on the project side. Some of the other communication that worked for me in the last 3-4 years, and what I learned from so again, I don't have any social science background or psychology background. It's my strategies are more practical and what I learned from. First thing, local versus global. So when we are communicating climate change, one thing that I thought would be useful is to frame your issues, whether you want to make it more localized, get more local impacts, local trends, and how it is impacting their local practices. Now, it is also dependent on your audience. Sometimes, for example, in agricultural community, local has always worked for me, as opposed to talking more globally and talking about trends. So just to give you this differences, when I present some of the changes that we see in Nebraska, and this is the warming trend, and this is the research that me and Ken Hubbard and Martha Shulsky did on soil temperature changes in Nebraska, to show them that the soil temperatures are warming, and it's kind of one of the justification why spring planting can be shifted a little bit earlier than it used to be in the previous decades. And so whenever I present that information versus some of the temperature changes globally, I almost never got any questions on the global side. Almost all the questions were from Nebraska. So, I mean, and that too from producers who typically just listen and not heavily engage in the interactive session. So, I mean, that's one strategy that I would think has worked for me. The other thing, how do we present information? Now, this figure is showing just conveys the message that almost from 1970 onwards, all the years were having temperature above normal. Anomalies. So this is the graph for temperature anomalies globally. And this bottom figure, since it's in this meeting, it won't work, but this was a simulation which kind of runs from, starting from 1884 till 2011, and it just showing, temperature changes across the globe, and by the time it reaches 1970 and onwards, many parts of the world are experiencing above normal temperatures. Visualizing that, a lot of times people get a lot of attention when I show them compared to the graph. So the way we present stuff does matter a lot, and you catch a lot of attention from people. Third strategy, convey the clear message. So this type of information always invites controversy and discussions, cause of climate change. So I typically use this slide, to show what are the main causes. One is natural cause, and the second one is anthropogenic, which is human-induced cause. And I always convey this message that based on the IPCC reports and other reports, human causes are the predominantly inducing climate change, causing this climate change, and natural causes are not are at the minimum compared to the anthropogenic cause. Even though it creates controversy, I still convey this message, because rather than normalizing the negative opinion, it might be it's a good idea to invite some of the positive conversation on and knowing the issue properly. So that's another strategy, is to frame your message and convey the clear message. Now I just wanted to point out another innovative action-based approach that we applied, and this is a project we started 2 years ago on how do we reduce our carbon footprint using practical actions that we can take in our day-to-day life and minimize some of the climate change impact at the local scale. So the project was Climate Masters for Nebraska, and then we had 3 leaders, including me, and Natalie is there, and Tanya, and it was initially funded by EPA. And so in this project, we invited local speakers who talk about some of the strategies to sustainable actions that you can take to reduce greenhouse gases. And once they learn those strategies, they go and teach others in the community, so that they kind of train the trainer mode. And that was a pretty successful project for us. Till now, I think we have more than 800, 900 hours of voluntary work reported by those Climate Master participants, and they did a lot of programming, and so this is just the pictures of different educations that they did. All right, I think that's all I have. Other ideas?
Excuse me, but that's just an excellent presentation. We're on listen-only mode. We'll have Sean get you guys on board.
All participants are now in interactive talk mode.
Great. We still have Randy Johnson online.
I'm still here, Michelle.
Oh, thank you so much, because I do know you've got a lot to get done there in Washington.
Yeah, meetings all the time. I don't mind missing them.
But what I really like today is essentially we're talking about 2 efforts at 2 huge scales. We're talking about this national one that just by the level of complexity is going to take a lot of meetings and other resources. And then you've got people like Tapan that's working with the people there in this whole idea of other ideas. What can we do given realities to affect change? And when I came into, actually I do need to acknowledge the other 2 co-organizers, Dan, Virginia Jen, who's research soil scientist with the Agricultural Research Service, and Candace William, a research soil scientist with the NRCS, as well as myself, who's a soil scientist. And yes, you can refer to us as the Soil Sisters. But getting back to this, what I actually saw as the crux of this is not the specifics of this regional hub and what to get onto it, but seeing what DuPont's able to do with Nebraska farmers, how to affect that change. The questions were, what science is needed by end users? What information do they want from us? What information do they need from us? What does that information need to look like? And the thing I would like to first put out for Randy's and DuPont's reaction is, DuPont, you had that result, is they do not want it electronic, and they do not want it very big. I should just preface this. I do read a lot of literature on the psychology of communication and what's the social and psychological foundations of climate change, improving how scientists communicate about climate change. And this one's very fascinating, the psychological and health outcomes of received information overload. And I think that maybe encapsulates what both of you are having to tackle with what we're going to be doing. So maybe first, Randy, getting some thoughts from you, because you're working at the large scale, but I know you're very pragmatic in your approach with all the work that you've done.
Well, I mean, everything you mentioned, I mean, if you look at peer-reviewed publication, they'll tell you, you know, written on paper has better comprehension than electronic. And if people are like me, they're not going to read more than, you know, one page, and unless that catches their interest, you're done. So it makes sense to me. But, you know, seriously, I think the way we're counting on getting information out is, as much as, you know, tools and websites help, when I talk to people who have put together a climate adaptation plan, this because they've worked with an individual at a university or somebody over here, it's person-to-person communications, and yeah, they need to read that, you know, that small pamphlet that has just the basics on it, but I think people trump small and paper even above that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it very much does. We have a question out there. And I have to get my special spy glasses here. Again, from Justin Dinner and ARS, do you think that having scientific information published in open access journals is advantageous for land managers?
No.
Okay, that's for Randy. And
I think I have the same answer as Randy has, because the thing is that if, you know, reading the manuscripts and getting, you know, 5 or 6 pages, you don't have a lot of time reading about it, rather than just, you know, the easy to digest material. So I think I would agree on that.
okay. We have a question from Deb Harms with NRCS.
For the UTU? Right, yeah, I think UTU have not just end users, producers, but also the crop, and especially they did the survey of the crop and so forth, and also they did this work with them to identify if this tool is this way, do you use it or do you need any more tweaking to it? And so, I mean, that was done in the first 2 years, and now we are kind of showing those tools to different producers. And I was continuously on the road this entire year, demonstrating those tools, and then the group I had was half farmers and half consultants who are interested in these tools. And so, yeah, we have this big mixture, and also the seed farmers too. Yeah. So the social scientists did do a lot of survey and participate with many of those.
And so the thing that you really bring up, who is that farmer going to be talking to? And is that farmer going to be feeling, or the person the farmer's speaking to is he or she going to be feeling comfortable and have enough ownership with climate information to even bring it up. So that's going to be key because we may have climate experts out there, but the farmer may never seek that person out. We have another question over here. Just give your name and talk loudly.
Could you please rephrase that question?
Sure. Okay, the question was when I talk about with the farmers on this issue, what is their major concern? Is it crop yield or soil health or any other conservations? So I think my answer is depends on the producer group, but majority is not even crop yield, but the total profit is their major. That's their bottom line, looking at the profit. And sometimes even it is recommended that during the rotation of corn, soybean, some of the farmers don't follow that rotation and do for corn just because it has more profit involved. And some of the farmers, for example, in my farmers panel, we had 2 farmers who were talking about, when we asked them about, what are the climate change impacts have you seen, and what do you think is a practical adaptation? And they specifically mentioned that they maintained their field as no-till for a longer period of time. And now, even in 2012 drought, they saw the advantage of doing that, compared to their neighbor fields. And so that message was pretty strong for other farmers in the panel too. So it depends, but majority is, bottom line is the profit. Owners, mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I don't have that distinguished between the leaser and owners of that. But yeah, I would think probably the owners might be more interested in the conservation side, I think. That's true. Oh, there was a question here. Yeah.
Could you speak up just a little bit, please?
Uh-huh. So you,
Could you repeat that
yeah,
one again? That
yeah.
was probably hard
So
to
as
hear.
probably correct me if I'm wrong. The question is, do farmers, how do we better use weather information, put it in tools, so that farmers can decide whether when to plant and when to fertilize their crops, and rather than just talking about the weather information itself, right? Yeah, I think the U2U project that I was mentioning about is specifically doing that, and they are taking this climate information and creating those tools. So one of the tools is growing degree date tool, where farmers can decide their planting date, and under those spring and fall spree scenarios, they can decide how many growing degree days they can accumulate for the season, which then they can decide whether they can go for a longer season variety versus shorter season variety based on their planting and harvest decisions. The other thing is, when I was in when I was in Florida, Southeast Climate Consortium had this crop modeling results put in the decision support system, where they can choose their planting and see, are we seeing any differences in the yield. From farmer side, as I learned from Southeast, there are some farmers are directly using that information, but mostly those kind of information is used by crop advisors who are advising farmers to make decisions. So it's more is used by the crop advisors than the farmers. Yeah, and then that probably might be true for U2U project as well. That they are doing the similar tools and products here in North Central or Convey region.
With regards to that, and I don't want to put Gary on the spot, did you have time to read the article that you forwarded to me, or maybe it was Mike, on Monsanto and John Deere and the like that will be putting sensors out in farmers' fields?
It was basically an article on people are using like yield monitors and other precision ag technology, sharing that with John Deere, Monsanto.
Rich?
Oh, the course might be focused on sure, but with the trusting, non-trusted sources, does anyone sort out if the information came from a trusted source, an extension person, will disseminate it through the mass media, untrusted, and then contaminate the trust?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think I'll have to refer to the social scientists who did this study, but yeah, I have no idea on whether there was any connection in that study. But that's a very good question. Yes, Ken? Right. And then, if you have looked at those opportunities and challenges in terms of communicating climate change, most of the opportunities did refer to, incentives or economic return. So if they see any benefit of those conservations for a long period of time, they might do it. But it's just a matter of how do we convey that in that profit and loss type of information.
I know in some carbon sessions that I've been at where we have landowners, the landowner that's using cover crops now into their fourth year during these times that have gotten great yields, the bottom dollar being, the all royal, they're way more effective than when I come up as a USDA person and talk in this global sense.
Right.
I can't even talk local like you, but you brought up several things there, essentially early adopters. They're probably going to be way more effective than many of us USDA people up here. I also think that it has to be brought down to the practice is not something for climate change. It is to reduce the risk, profit risk. I think we are going to enter an era, and I would say probably within 10 years, hopefully not sooner, that we will be looking at ecological risk. If you look at what happened in 2012 going into 2013, Iowa had some storm events. Soil erosion from way over 13 counties was over 5 tons per acre, which is above the T level. The amount of nitrogen coming off some of these fields, 55, and I'm going to get my units mixed up now. Might have been 55 kilograms or 55 pounds, whatever. It was a heck of a lot of nitrogen coming off. If we have continued events like that, I think there will be this ecological awareness where the public may start impinging on what the landowners can do. In the meantime, it will be the almighty profit because one good year out of 5 is still profitable. So you bring in all these things, and I think that's some of the factors that need to be taken into account right up front when we're in the hubs. Early on as a scientist, I thought data was almighty. And there is a paper that says, as scientists, we've tried to drown people with data to the point that they will succumb. And, now they're getting ready to retire and now realize that was maybe the wrong road to go down. At this point, we've essentially had all this time. Is there any parting comments from Randy Johnson with regards to the hubs? And
just send me an email if you got specific questions, or give me a call. I have no problem talking with anybody.
Excellent. And Tapan, any closing remarks?
Well, this is, just a kind of a brief abstract of overall climate change communication issue, and then there can be a big presentations on that. But yeah, this is, if you have any comments to how to improve communication, or if you have any other ideas, just drop me an email or call me.
Well, I want to thank both of our speakers today. Like I said, we were very, very fortunate to be able to get both of them. What I'm really hoping that it's initiated in all of your minds is this little niggling thought is, how might we work together a little bit more with the people in this room? I'm aware of Ken's work. I'm aware of the High Plains group. I'm aware of all these things. Many times when I get pulled into a project, it's the demand assured, and all we're doing is reacting in our responses. And I think we need to be a little bit more proactive in how we approach things, and the regional hubs may give us that platform. So with that, I'll close. I would like to thank Sean McVeigh for helping us with the technology.